The paperwork would be the death of her. That, Sarah Kincaid decided, was how it would end. Not with a bang, not with some exotic flesh-eating bacteria contracted in the ER, but with a slow, suffocating avalanche of triplicate forms. Patient A, non-compliant. Patient B, AMA. Patient C, allergic to. Her 1998 Honda Civic sputtered at the red light, the windshield wipers squeaking a rhythmic off-key protest against the gray Seattle drizzle. 5:02 p.m. She'd been off shift for exactly 2 minutes. She was already dreading the 12-hour shift that would start again tomorrow. The smell of stale coffee from the cup holder and the damp wool of her peacoat filled the small car. It was just another Tuesday. Then the world ripped apart. It started not with a bang, but with a sickening metallic crunch that vibrated through the soles of her sneakers. Sarah's head snapped up. A dark green, almost black SUV, government judging by the tinted windows and lack of chrome, was spinning in the middle of the intersection she'd been about to enter. A battered flatbed truck, its grille smashed, was grinding against it, pushing it into a light pole. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of tortured metal. Then came the pop, pop, pop. It wasn't the cannon blast of a movie. It was a dry, cracking sound, like a string of firecrackers, only deadlier. Sarah's brain, trained by a decade of triage and trauma, didn't panic. It cataloged. 1. Gunfire. 2. The flatbed truck wasn't an accident. 3 men in dark rain slickers were piling out. 2 from the cab, 1 from the flatbed itself. They held short, ugly-looking rifles. 3. The government SUV's doors burst open. 2 men in dark suits they had clearly paid a lot of money for, were out, pistols in hand, using the car doors as shields. 4. This was an ambush. This was happening, right here at the corner of 4th and Marion. Sarah didn't duck. Not yet. She was frozen, a spectator. One of the men in suits staggered, a red flower blooming on his white shirt, and fell back into the SUV. The other got off 3 shots before a volley of rifle fire stitched him from hip to shoulder. He collapsed onto the wet asphalt. The men from the truck advanced. One of them yanked open the rear passenger door of the SUV. That's when Sarah saw him. He wasn't a suit. He was a kid, maybe 19, 20 at the most. He was hauled out of the back seat and thrown to the ground. He was in a full Marine Corps dress uniform, the deep blue trousers, the red-striped bloodline, the crisp white hat that now rolled absurdly into the gutter. He was an escort, a ceremonial guard, a kid. He tried to scramble backward, his white-gloved hands slipping on the rain-slicked street. One of the attackers raised his rifle. A new sound joined the chaos. Sirens, high-low, wee-woo, closing fast. The attackers paused. One yelled, "Forget him! Grab the case! Go!" One of the men grabbed a silver briefcase from the SUV's open door. The other, the one who had pulled the Marine out, seemed displeased. As a parting gift, he fired a single, casual shot at the kid on the ground. The Marine screamed. It wasn't a tough John Wayne scream. It was a high, terrified wail that cut through the sirens and the rain. The men piled back into their truck, which, despite the crash, roared to life and sped off, running the red light Sarah was still waiting for. Silence descended, heavy and thick, broken only by the hiss of steam from the ruined SUV and the approaching sirens. And the gurgling. Sarah's eyes locked onto the Marine. He was clutching his right leg, high up, near the groin. A dark, pulsing stain was spreading over the blue fabric of his trousers. Femoral artery, her brain supplied, cold and clinical. He has 90 seconds, maybe less. A Seattle PD cruiser skidded to a stop, lights flashing, creating a barricade. A heavy-set cop, mustache and all, got out, gun drawn. "Nobody moves! Stay in your cars!" he bellowed. Sarah moved. Her hand was on the door handle. "Don't!" her survival instinct whispered. "It's not your problem. You're off shift. There are cops. There are guns." But the nurse in her brain was louder. Gurgling, pulsing. 90 seconds. She was out of the car. "Ma'am, get back in your vehicle, now!" The cop screamed at her. She ignored him, running to her trunk. She fumbled with the keys, her hands suddenly shaking. She popped the latch. Inside, next to a spare tire and a box of granola bars, was her off-duty trauma kit. The oh shit bag. She grabbed it. "Ma'am, this is a crime scene. I will tase you." She sprinted. The 20 yards from her car to the Marine felt like a mile. The pavement was slick, littered with glass. She skidded to her knees beside him. "Oh, God," the kid whispered. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a terror that broke her heart. He couldn't have been older than her nephew. "Oh, God, it hurts. I can't feel—" "What's your name, Marine?" Sarah said, her voice dropping into the calm, authoritative ER voice that had soothed 1,000 drunks and gunshot victims. She ripped open her kit. "Evans," he choked. "Corporal Corporal Evans." "Okay, Corporal Evans. I'm Sarah. I'm an ER nurse. You're bleeding fast, so this is gonna hurt like hell. You ready?" She didn't wait for an answer. She ripped the tourniquet from its plastic. She knew she couldn't get it high enough and tight enough over his thick uniform. She grabbed her shears. "Hey, lady!" The cop was advancing on her now, his gun still up, but pointed at the ground, his face a mask of confusion and anger. "He's bleeding out," Sarah yelled back, not looking up. She cut his trousers from the cuff to the hip, exposing the wound. It was a nightmare. A single ragged hole, and out of it, a rhythmic gush, gush, gush of bright red. "Oh, God," Evans whimpered again, his eyes rolling back. "Stay with me, Evans," she barked, wrapping the tourniquet strap high on his thigh, right up against the groin. She fed the strap through the buckle and pulled. Hard. Evans shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, and tried to buck her off. "I'm sorry, kid, I'm sorry," she muttered, twisting the windlass. Once, twice, 3 times. The gushing slowed to a fast, angry ooze. She secured the windlass. Okay, that's one. A new sound, a pop. Not from the street, from the rooftops. "Sniper!" the cop yelled, diving back behind his cruiser. "They've got overwatch!" Another pop. A chip of concrete exploded from the curb, 6 inches from Sarah's head. They weren't shooting at the cops. They were shooting at her. They were finishing the job. Evans was helpless. She was exposed. She had no choice. "Cover your head!" she yelled, and with no other thought than to protect her patient, she threw her entire body over the wounded Marine. She lay flat on top of him, her head next to his, her body shielding the wound and his vitals. "It's okay, Corporal," she whispered into his ear, her voice shaking for the first time. "It's okay. They're coming." Whomp. A fist of white-hot iron slammed into her left shoulder. The force of it took her breath away, a searing, electric pain that radiated down her arm. She cried out, biting her lip to keep from screaming. "You're hit!" Evans gurgled, panic in his eyes. "It's fine," she gasped, the lie tasting like copper. "It's just a graze. I'm fine. Don't you dare close your eyes, Evans. You and I are going to have a very boring conversation about the weather. You like the rain, Corporal?" A black tactical van screeched to a halt, blocking them from the sniper's line of sight. 4 men in full SWAT gear piled out, forming a perimeter. The world dissolved into a chaos of men shouting, of boots on pavement. The first person to reach her wasn't a medic. It was the heavy-set cop. He was kneeling beside her, his gun holstered, his eyes as wide as saucers. He looked at her, covered in her blood and the Marine's, a bleeding hole in her coat. He looked at the tourniquet, cranked so tight it looked like it was part of the boy's leg. "My God, lady," the cop breathed, his voice full of a genuine, stunned awe. "You're a hero." Sarah let her head fall back onto the wet street, the rain cool on her face. She finally let the adrenaline go. She started to shake. A hero, she thought, closing her eyes. Okay, I can live with that. It was the last kind word she would hear for 47 hours. The adrenaline high lasted for approximately 4 minutes. It evaporated the instant the tactical team cleared the scene and the medics, her colleagues from Seattle General, arrived. "Sarah, what the hell are you— You're hit!" It was Mark, a paramedic she'd shared 1,000 gallows humor jokes with. "It's a graze. I'm fine," she said, wincing as she tried to sit up. "Get him. CPL Evans, femoral artery GSW. Tourniquet applied 1704. He's conscious, but he's losing it." Mark and his partner got to work on Evans, their movements a blur of practiced efficiency. They had him on a gurney in seconds. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Mark yelled back, "Sarah, my partner's coming back for you. Don't move." She just nodded, the pain in her shoulder starting to throb in time with her pulse. The heavy-set cop was standing over her, holding a blanket. "You did good, ma'am, real good." "Thanks," she managed, trying to pull the blanket around her. Her coat was soaked, and the cold was setting in. "Ma'am, Sarah Kincaid?" The voice was new. It was flat, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion. She looked up. A man in a crisp gray suit was standing where the cop had been. He was tall, thin, with a narrow face and eyes that looked like polished stones. He held a black leather badge wallet in his hand. "Agent Thorne, NCIS," he said. He didn't offer a hand. "You're going to need to come with me." I need to go to the hospital," Sarah stammered. "I've been shot." Thorne's eyes flicked to her shoulder, then back to her face. He was completely unimpressed. "The medic can look at that in the car. You just compromised a federal crime scene, ma'am. You're a material witness, and we need your statement. Now." "Compromised?" The word stung. "I just saved his life." "You contaminated evidence is what you did," Thorne snapped, his voice dropping. "You ran past an active police perimeter. You applied an unsanitized device to a material witness. You touched him. You touched everything. Now get up. We're leaving." He didn't help her. He grabbed her by her good arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and hauled her to her feet. The movement sent a fresh wave of agony through her shoulder. She cried out. Thorne ignored it. He marched her to an unmarked black sedan, shoving her unceremoniously into the back seat. The cop with the mustache just watched, his face unreadable, and turned away. So much for being a hero. The back of the car smelled like stale air freshener. A second man, built like a vending machine and just as silent, sat in the passenger seat. Thorne got in the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb without a word. "Where are we going? The hospital is that way." "We're going to the federal building," Thorne said, his eyes on the road. "You can see a medic there." The medic was a sour-faced man in a bad suit who looked more like an accountant. He was waiting for them in a concrete parking garage. He pulled her from the car, took her into a brightly lit bathroom, and had her take off her coat. "It's a through and through," he said, dabbing at the entry and exit wounds with a rough gauze pad. "No fragments, looks like. You're lucky." He slapped 2 large bandages on her shoulder, pressed down hard enough to make her see stars, and said, "You'll live." "Does it need stitches? A tetanus shot?" Sarah asked, her nurse's brain kicking in. "That's for your personal doctor to decide. We've just confirmed you're not dying on our property. Give me your phone." "What? Why?" "It's evidence," Thorne said, appearing in the doorway. "You were at an active crime scene. Your device's GPS and cell data are now part of the investigation. Hand it over." Numbly, she gave him her phone. He dropped it into a silver Ziploc bag and sealed it. In that moment, she felt more violated than when the bullet had hit her. She was cut off. They didn't put her in a waiting room. They put her in an interrogation room. It was windowless, painted a shade of beige that screamed despair, and furnished with a single metal table and 3 hard plastic chairs. A fluorescent light overhead flickered. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Thorne sat opposite her. The silent, refrigerator-sized agent stood by the door. His arms were crossed. He never moved. "Let's start from the beginning," Thorne said, opening a laptop. "State your name for the record." "Sarah Kincaid." "Look, can I get a lawyer? I feel like I need a lawyer." Thorne gave her a thin, reptilian smile. "Are you under arrest, Ms. Kincaid?" "No, but..." "Then you don't need a lawyer. You're a witness. We're just having a chat. Now, why did you run past a police perimeter into an active firefight?" "He was bleeding, the Marine, Evans. He was hit in the femoral. He was dying. And you, an off-duty civilian, made this medical determination from 50 yards away?" I saw the blood. I heard him. I'm a trauma nurse. I knew the signs." "So you thought you knew the signs, and you decided your knowledge superseded a direct lawful order from a Seattle police officer to stay in your vehicle?" Sarah's frustration was building, a hot ball in her throat. He would have been dead by the time that officer felt it was safe. He had maybe 2 minutes. "I acted." "You interfered, Ms. Kincaid. Let's call it what it is." Thorne leaned forward. "Let's talk about your hero complex. Is this something you do often? Run into dangerous situations? I'm an ER nurse. My entire job is a dangerous situation. On the clock, yes, in a hospital, with equipment, with permission. You had no permission. You were a vigilante, Ms. Kincaid. You were playing cowboy. I was saving a man's life, she yelled, her voice echoing in the small, dead room. Her shoulder was on fire. She was exhausted. She was still in her damp clothes. That's not for you to determine, Thorne said, his voice dangerously quiet. What if you had been killed? What if you'd been taken hostage? You would have escalated the situation, endangered the officers? Did you think of that? I thought about him bleeding to death on the pavement. How did you know he was a Marine? Thorne abruptly changed tactics. His uniform, the blue, the hat. You recognized it instantly. Are you former military, Ms. Kincaid? No, my grandfather was, but no. Do you have any association with military personnel? Friends? Family? Lovers? No, what are you implying? I'm implying it's a strange coincidence that you, of all the people in all the cars at that light, were the only one to run out and help a Marine you supposedly didn't know. I was the only one with a trauma kit and the training to use it. So you say. Thorne scribbled a note. Let's go back. The men in the truck, what did they say? I don't know. Something about a case. Forget him, grab the case, but hey, that's it. You're sure? You were very close to Corporal Evans. Did he say anything to you? He told me his name. He said he was hurt. He was in shock. He didn't say thereafter Thorne made a "what was it" gesture. Ah, yes, the Prometheus file. The what? No, he was screaming. I was trying to stop him from dying. So, you deny hearing anything about Prometheus? Yes, I deny it. I've never heard that word. Interesting, Thorne sat back. Because it would make a lot more sense if you were involved. If you knew him, if this was all a performance. The blood drained from Sarah's face. You think I'm one of them? The attackers? I got shot. A graze, Thorne said dismissively. Superficial, a flesh wound, as they say. Convenient. Just enough to look heroic, not enough to be serious. It's a good cover, Ms. Kincaid, a very good cover. This was a nightmare. This wasn't happening. She was in a cold, buzzing room, being accused of being a terrorist by a man with dead eyes, while her shoulder throbbed and her life fell apart. This is insane, she whispered. I saved his life. You keep saying that, Thorne said. We'll see. The doctors at the hospital will determine if the field dressing you applied did more harm than good. You're not a surgeon. You cranked a piece of plastic onto his leg in a dirty street. You could have cost him the leg. You could have caused irreparable nerve damage. But I'm sure you thought of that with all your training. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. He was twisting everything. Her best, most instinctive, most correct action was being reframed as a reckless, amateurish mistake. They kept her there for 8 hours. 8 hours. They gave her 1 cup of lukewarm, bitter coffee and wouldn't let her use the restroom without the silent agent standing outside the door. They went over her story again and again. And again, Thorne asked the same questions in different ways, trying to trap her. What time did you leave the hospital? Did you stop anywhere on the way? Why that route? Do you always go that way? What did the sniper look like? How did you know it was a sniper? Why did you cover him? Were you protecting your accomplice? By 3 a.m., Sarah was beyond exhausted. She was a hollowed-out shell. Her body ached, her shoulder was a constant dull fire, and her brain felt like it was full of wet sand. Finally, Thorne closed his laptop. All right, Ms. Kincaid, we're done for now. Done? I can go? Yes. He stood up, stretching. We'll need you to come back tomorrow to sign your official statement. Don't leave town. He and the silent agent walked out, just left her there. Sarah sat for a full minute, unsure. She slowly got to her feet, her joints cracking. She opened the door. The hallway was empty. She found her way to the lobby, a sterile marble expanse watched over by a bored security guard. Agent Thorne said I could go, she said. The guard grunted and buzzed the door open. She stepped out onto the street. It was 3:15 a.m. It was raining, harder now. Her car was still at the crime scene, 5 miles away. Her phone was in an evidence bag. She had no money, just her hospital ID and her car keys. She stood on the curb, the rain plastering her hair to her face, and for the first time since the bullet had hit her, Sarah Kincaid cried. She felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. After a few minutes of hollow sobs, she jammed her hands in her pockets, turned, and began the long, cold walk to her own hospital. She had to get her shoulder treated, and she had to figure out what, in God's name, was happening. The walk from the Federal Building to Seattle General was 57 blocks. It took her almost 2 hours. Each step was a fresh misery, the damp cold seeping into her bones and setting her grazed shoulder alight with a deep, pulsing ache. She was invisible. The city at 4:00 a.m. was a ghost town of street sweepers and bakery trucks. No one saw the blood-caked, shivering woman walking past them. When she finally pushed through the automatic doors of the ER, the familiar blast of warm air and antiseptic smell almost made her buckle. "Ma'am, can I—" "Sarah?" It was triage nurse Brenda, her night shift counterpart. Brenda's eyes went from Sarah's face to her ruined, bloody coat, to the makeshift bandages peeking out. "My God, Sarah, what happened to you? We heard there was a shooting." "It's a long story, Bren," Sarah mumbled, the exhaustion making her words slur. I got shot. It's a graze. I need it cleaned. Maybe some stitches." "Shot? Jesus." Brenda had her in a wheelchair before she could protest, rolling her back into an empty trauma bay. "Who did this? Where have you been?" "Federal Building. NCIS, Agent Thorne," Sarah said, the names tasting like ash. They were asking questions." Brenda's face tightened. "Asking questions? For 8 hours? You're a victim, Sarah, not a—" "What did they think?" "They think I don't know, a suspect, a vigilante." The curtain ripped back. It wasn't a doctor. It was Dr. Croft, the hospital administrator, his tie already perfectly knotted at 5:00 a.m., his face a mask of pinched concern. "Sarah," he said, his voice quiet. Too quiet. "I got a call from the Justice Department. They told me you were here." "Croft," she said, relief washing over her. "Thank God. These federal guys are insane. They've had me in a box for hours. They took my phone. They're accusing me of being part of the ambush." Dr. Croft did not look relieved. He looked ill. He looked at Brenda. "Brenda, could you give us a minute? I'll have Dr. Evanson check on Ms. Kincaid." Brenda shot Sarah a worried look, then nodded and slipped out, drawing the curtain. "Croft, what's going on?" Sarah asked. "The call wasn't just from the DOJ, Sarah," he said, clasping his hands behind his back. "It was from our legal team and our insurance carrier. They were very concerned." "Concerned about what?" "I saved that Marine's life. He came in here, right? Sitpal St. Evans. Is he okay?" "He's in surgery," Croft said evasively. "He's critical. But that's not the issue, Sarah. The issue is your actions at the scene." Sarah felt the cold dread from the interrogation room return. "What actions? I applied a tourniquet. I'm a trained nurse." "You are a trained nurse in this hospital," Croft said, his voice hardening. "You are licensed to practice medicine within these walls under our supervision and our liability coverage. You were not on duty. You were not covered. You were a civilian. You ran past a police line, which is a crime. You performed an invasive procedure in the street. Sarah, do you have any idea what you've exposed us to?" "Exposed you to?" She was incredulous. I I don't understand. Liability, Croft hissed, his composure cracking. A lawsuit. From who, you ask? From the Marine's family if you damaged his leg. From the federal government for compromising their investigation. From the city for disobeying a police officer. You acted recklessly, Sarah. You were not a nurse in that moment. You were, as Agent Thorne put it, a civilian playing doctor. The same words. Vigilante. Playing doctor. They had coordinated. The system was closing ranks. He was dying, Croft, she screamed, all her exhaustion and pain and fear boiling over. He had a femoral bleed. What was I supposed to do? Let him die so the hospital's insurance premiums wouldn't go up? You were supposed to be a witness, Croft shot back. You were supposed to stay in your car and let the sworn officers and paramedics who are covered for this handle it. They weren't there. He would have been dead. Dead. Doesn't that matter? Dr. Croft took a deep breath and straightened his tie. The administrator was back, the flash of anger gone. What matters, Sarah, is that this hospital cannot and will not be held liable for your impulsive behavior. The board had an emergency call. Effective immediately, you are suspended, pending a full investigation. The words hit her like a physical blow. Suspended. We have to, Sarah. We have to distance the hospital from your actions. You are a free agent. A rogue element. We can't have that. It's an insurance nightmare. I've worked here for 10 years, she whispered, the fight draining out of her. This is my life. And you should have thought of that before you decided to play hero. His voice was cold. A doctor will be in to see to your shoulder. But you are not to access any hospital systems. You are not to speak to any staff about this. You will be escorted out of the building afterward. Turn in your badge. He held out his hand. Numbly, she unclipped the ID badge from the waistband of her scrubs, the ones she'd had on under her coat. The plastic card with her smiling face from 8 years ago felt impossibly heavy. She placed it in his smooth, uncalloused palm. I'm sorry it's come to this, Sarah, he said. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded like a man who had just solved a very expensive problem. He left. A young resident she'd never seen before came in, stitched her shoulder with clumsy, painful pokes, gave her a tetanus shot, and left without making eye contact. A security guard, a man she'd shared coffee with just yesterday, appeared at the curtain. Ma'am, I'm supposed to walk you out. She was ma'am, not Sarah. She was an outsider. He walked her through the ER, past her friends, past the trauma bay where she had saved countless lives. Brenda was at the desk, pointedly looking at a chart, refusing to meet her eyes. The betrayal stung worse than the bullet. The guard walked her to the front door, the same one she'd stumbled through 2 hours ago. He held it open. Have a good day, ma'am. She stepped out. The 5 a.m. gloom was giving way to a watery gray dawn. She was jobless. She was injured. She was a suspect. She took a cab to the impound lot, thank God she'd had a spare $20 bill in her coat pocket, and paid a ridiculous fee to get her car. The crime scene tape was gone. The intersection was just an intersection again, dark stains on the pavement, the only sign of what had happened. She drove home to her small, empty apartment. She turned on the TV as she fumbled for the first aid kit to redress her shoulder. A local news anchor was on Topapari's developing story. Sources within the federal investigation of yesterday's brazen downtown ambush have expressed concern. A mystery woman, now identified as a local nurse, interfered with the crime scene, potentially compromising the investigation. Federal sources say her reckless actions may have, and we're quoting here, critically endangered the life of the wounded Marine she was claiming to help. Sarah's knees gave out. She sank to the floor. It wasn't just Thorne. It wasn't just Croft. It was the world. They were painting her as the villain. A federal source, Thorne, it had to be Thorne, had leaked a story that made her sound like a fame-hungry, incompetent fool who had nearly killed a hero. She looked at her phone sitting on the counter where she'd dropped her keys. Oh, God, she didn't even have her phone. She couldn't call her mom. She couldn't call a lawyer. She couldn't even text her friends to say she was alive. She was completely, utterly cut off. She crawled to her couch, pulled a blanket over her, and stared at the ceiling as the gray light of morning filled the room. She was no longer Sarah Kincaid, trauma nurse. She was the mystery woman, the vigilante, the insurance nightmare. She fell into a numb, dreamless sleep, her last thought a cold, terrifying one. What if they're right? What if I did hurt him? Sarah woke up at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Her body felt like it had been run over by the flatbed truck. Her shoulder was a universe of throbbing, fiery pain. Her head was thick. For a blissful second, she didn't remember. Then it all came flooding back: the ambush, the blood, Thorne, Croft, the badge, the news report. She was suspended. She was a suspect. She was also starving. She fumbled in her kitchen, her left arm useless, and managed to make a bowl of cereal. She ate it standing, staring at the blank, silent wall. Her apartment had never felt so quiet. Her phone, her connection to the world, was gone. Her landline, a relic she kept for emergencies, sat on the desk, mocking her. Who would she even call? She turned on the TV again. The local news had her picture now, a grainy, unflattering shot from her hospital ID, the one she had just surrendered. Sarah Kincaid, the nurse at the center of yesterday's shooting, has been suspended from Seattle General. They were using her name. The mystery was gone. Now she was a target. She was just putting her bowl in the sink when the landline rang. The sound so alien made her jump. She snatched it up. Hello? Ms. Kincaid, Agent Thorne. Her blood ran cold. How did you get this number? You listed it on your employment forms at the hospital, which we subpoenaed. We have your phone back, by the way. You can pick it up. We also need you to come in and sign your statement. We found some inconsistencies. Inconsistencies. The word was a threat. What inconsistencies? We'll discuss it when you get here. 4 p.m. Don't be late. He hung up. It was 3:15 p.m. He was toying with her. She threw on the first clean clothes she could find, a painful one-arm struggle into a sweatshirt, and drove to the federal building. She felt like a lamb returning to the slaughterhouse. She was exhausted, in pain, and now publicly humiliated. She walked into the sterile marble lobby. The same bored guard was at the desk. He looked up, his eyes flickered in recognition, and a small, cruel smirk played on his lips. The one who wanted to be famous, right? He sneered. Thorne's waiting for you, 6th floor. Sarah ignored him, her face burning, and walked to the elevator. The hero cop from the scene was a distant, foggy memory. This was her new reality. Everyone in a uniform was an enemy. Thorne didn't make her wait in the interrogation room. He made her wait in the hallway, on a hard wooden bench, for 3 hours. People in suits walked by, some of them glancing at her, whispering. She was a zoo animal. She was the rogue nurse. At 6:45 p.m., Thorne finally emerged from his office. Ms. Kincaid, come in. His office was just as beige and joyless as the rest of the building. He sat behind his desk and gestured for her to sit. Her phone was on the desk, still in its silver evidence bag. We ran the data on your phone, he said, tapping the bag. Nothing interesting. You seem boring. Can I have it? In a minute, he pulled out a stack of papers. Your statement. We've had it typed up. I just need you to read it and sign the bottom of each page. She took the stack. It was her words mostly, but twisted. I admit I ignored a police officer. I interfered with the scene. I had no way of knowing if the Marine was alive. The part where she said she was a nurse was followed by a parenthetical, not on duty, license not applicable. This isn't right, she said. This makes me sound accurate, Thorne supplied. Read the new part, page 5. She flipped to page 5. At 17:03, she read, I observed the attackers. I thought I heard them say, grab the case. I did not hear them say Prometheus. That's what you said, Thorne said. But I did hear grab the case, much as I'm sure of it. This makes it sound like I'm guessing. You were under duress, Ms. Kincaid. You were in shock. Your memory is unreliable. That's our official position. He leaned forward. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely sure you didn't know Corporal Evans? That you have no connection to him, his family, his unit? I've never seen him before in my life. Because it's just so neat, Thorne mused. You, the only medical professional for blocks, just happened to be right there. Just happened to have a trauma kit. It's a 1 in a million chance, Sarah, and I don't believe in chances. He was back to implying she was a conspirator. He was trying to break her. I want a lawyer, she said, her voice small. Thorne sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. You're still not under arrest. You're just signing a witness statement. If you refuse to sign, well, that would be very interesting. That would look a lot like you have something to hide. It would be uncooperative, and I'd have to note that in my report. He had her trapped. If she signed, she was agreeing to his twisted version of the truth. If she didn't, she was obstructing a federal investigation. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. She signed, page after page, her name, a signature she barely recognized on a stack of lies. She pushed the stack back. There. Can I go? Can I have my phone? Thorne smiled. He slid the evidence bag across the desk. You can go. Sarah grabbed the phone and practically ran from the office, from the building. She got into her car, slammed the door, and rested her head on the steering wheel, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She finally had her phone. She turned it on. The screen lit up. 142 new text messages, 88 missed calls, 21 voicemails. They were from her mom, her brother, her friends from the hospital, people she hadn't heard from in years. Sarah, are you okay? We saw the news. Call me. WTF is happening? I know you. This is bullshit. Don't listen to them, Sarah. You're a hero. A wave of relief, so profound it was painful, washed over her. They didn't all hate her. Her people, her real people, knew the truth. She was about to call her mom when a new text message popped up, a number she didn't recognize. Hey, Sarah, it's Mark. From the ambulance. Her heart leaped. Mark. He'd been there. He'd seen it. Mark, I'm okay. It's been a nightmare. Her phone buzzed immediately. I bet, listen, I'm not supposed to be texting you. Croft and NCIS have put the fear of God in everyone at the hospital. We're not to have contact. It's okay, Mark. I understand. Everyone's distant. She paused, her thumb hovering over the screen. She had to ask. The one question that Thorne had planted in her head, the one that was eating her alive. Mark? The Marine, CPL Evans. Is he alive? Did I do the right thing? The 3 dots Mark is typing appeared. They vanished. They reappeared. He was hesitating. Oh God, Mark, just tell me. The text that came back shattered what was left of her world. He's alive. He's in the ICU. But Sarah, you should know, the surgeons, they're unhappy. That's the word I heard. The tourniquet. It was on for a long time. They're not sure they can save the leg. I heard one of the vascular guys say the field dressing might have caused more damage than the bullet. Sarah dropped the phone. It hit the floor mat with a dull thud. More damage. Cost him the leg. Irreparable nerve damage. Thorne's words, Croft's words, and now Mark's. It was true. She hadn't been a hero. She had been a vigilante. She had been playing doctor. In her arrogance, in her hero complex, she had rushed in and crippled a 19-year-old kid. She had made it worse. She didn't storm out this time. She didn't yell. She just sat in her car in the dark parking garage of the federal building, and a single hot tear rolled down her cheek. This was worse than being a suspect. This was worse than being fired. This was a failure of her core identity. She wasn't a healer. She was a butcher. She drove home, the 142 unanswered text messages burning a hole in her pocket. She went to her apartment. She looked at her nursing diploma on the wall, her own name staring back at her, and she felt like a complete and total fraud. She opened a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey she kept for guests, and poured a heavy glass. She sat on the couch in the dark. 47 hours had passed since the ambush. She was jobless, a public pariah, and, worst of all, a failure as a nurse. She took a long, burning drink. The whiskey didn't help. It just sat, hot and heavy, in her stomach. A liquid echo of the shame and failure churning inside her. She was on her second glass, staring at the muted television, her own face staring back at her in a loop of local nurse suspended, when she heard it, a knock. It wasn't it Anna said, "Hello, neighbor, knock." It was sharp, official, and powerful. Rap. Rap. Rappy. 3 clean, authoritative sounds that vibrated in her chest. Thorne. It had to be. He'd found a new inconsistency. He was here to arrest her. Maybe for crippling the Marine. Maybe they'd finally decided she was a terrorist. She was too tired to care. She got up, her stockinged feet unsteady on the floor. She looked through the peephole. It wasn't Thorne. Her breath hitched. Standing in the dimly lit hallway of her apartment building was a man. He was tall, ramrod straight, and wearing a full Marine Corps service dress uniform. The A uniform. Greens and khaki, a chest full of ribbons, and on his shoulders 2 silver stars. A major general. He was flanked by 2 other Marines in dress blues, both built like brick walls, both staring straight ahead, their expressions carved from granite. Sarah's hand, the one not holding the whiskey glass, trembled as she fumbled with the deadbolt. She opened the door. The whiskey glass slipped from her other hand, shattering on the entryway tile, splashing amber liquid and ice cubes over her feet. She didn't even notice. The general's eyes flicked into the broken glass, then back to her face. He didn't smile. He didn't sneer. He just looked. "Ma'am," his voice was a low, gravelly baritone that commanded respect. "Are you Sarah Kincaid?" Yes. Yes, sir," she whispered. The sir was instinctive. "I'm Major General Matthews, ma'am. I'm Corporal Evans, commanding officer. I've just come from Seattle General." This was it, the final nail. He was here to tell her she had cost his Marine a leg. He was here to personally, officially end her. She braced for the impact, her eyes squeezing shut. I'm so sorry," she whispered, the tears she'd held back finally breaking free. I thought I was helping. I didn't mean to hurt him. They said I made it worse." General Matthews's stony expression softened, just a fraction, into something like confusion. "Hurt him, ma'am? Who told you that?" "Agent Thorne, Dr. Croft, my friends. They said the surgeons, the leg." The general's eyes hardened. "I see." He took a half step forward, not entering, but commanding the space. "Ms. Kincaid, I just spent an hour with Dr. Peterson, the head of trauma surgery. She's the one who operated on Corporal Evans." Sarah held her breath. "Dr. Peterson wanted me to tell you something," the general continued, his voice clear and precise. "She said the bullet severed his femoral artery and nicked the bone. She said that by all medical logic, he should have bled out on that street before the ambulance even arrived." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "She said the only reason Corporal Evans is alive right now, the only reason he will keep his leg, is because some goddamn combat medic applied a perfect textbook tourniquet, cranked it to the exact necessary pressure to stop the bleed without killing the tissue, and then used her own body to shield him from a second volley of gunfire." He locked eyes with her. She said it was the single best piece of battlefield trauma care she had ever seen from a civilian. "She wants to know where you trained." Sarah's legs gave out. She didn't fall, she just sank, catching herself against the doorframe. The sobs that came out of her weren't sobs of grief. They were great, ragged, tearing gasps of 48 hours of terror and shame and betrayal and fear all being ripped out of her at once. But, Thorne said, Croft said, Ms. Kincaid, the general said, and his voice was now laced with a cold, hard anger that wasn't directed at her. There's a difference between bureaucracy and valor. Agent Thorne and Dr. Croft are currently in a very long, very unpleasant meeting with a team of my lawyers from the JAG Corps, where they are learning that difference. You will be getting your job back, Ms. Kincaid, with a full public apology. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple, dark blue velvet case. He opened it. Inside was a bronze medal on a blue and gold ribbon. This is the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, he said. We don't ever plan to give these to civilians. But the president sends his personal thanks, and the commandant of the Marine Corps told me to make an exception or find a new job. He didn't hand it to her. He just held it out. Her hand, shaking, covered in whiskey and tears, reached out and took the case. It was heavy. Corporal Evans is alive, Miss Kincaid, the general said. His mother in Iowa sends her... Well, she said a lot of things I can't repeat, but she's grateful. Get yourself cleaned up. You're a credit to your profession. He didn't smile. He just gave her a curt, respectful nod, turned on his heel, and, flanked by his 2 silent guards, marched down the hallway. Sarah Kincaid stood in her doorway, the smell of whiskey and broken glass at her feet, and the weight of a medal in her hand. The rage was gone. The fear was gone. The shame was gone. She was still shaking, but it wasn't from cold. It was from vindication. She was, and always had been, a nurse.